Hi, Anisa. Welcome to Network Capital. Really excited to have a conversation about your really interesting journey from liberal arts to now tech. And in between, there have been lots of adventures. So tell us a bit about who you are and what do you do today?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me so much. I'm excited to be here and chat with you a little bit about just what I do and what we're up to. So what I do in my second company, which is Tiny Broadway, is we basically we bring books to life. So what we do is we provide a way for teachers and educators to help foster literacy in early education amongst their students by bringing books to life. And the medium we choose is art and theater to help bring books to life. We're really, really excited to be working with amazing talent across the nation, amazing artistic background talent, and also just educators from backgrounds across the nation as well, but primarily focus on NYC.
So that's not how you started, right? What was growing up like? You're an international kid. Where did you grow up? What did you study in college?
Well, I was born in Canada, so I'm an immigrant to the US. I was born in Canada, and when I was really young, my family had moved. We were in Italy when I was younger, and then a lot of my formative years were actually in Pakistan. And so it was very different, right? Because you don't really see the story where immigrant parents come to, another country, to the West, if you will, and then have kids and take their kids back home, if you will. But that's kind of what happened with us. So I did a lot of my schooling abroad, even though I was born in Canada. So I was super young when we left. And then I came back to Canada for university. I did neuroscience and philosophy. And then after that, when I got into Y Combinator with my last startup, is when we moved to the US. So that was in 2015. So quite the journey, quite the travel. Yeah. Identity was always an interesting topic growing up.
Yeah, we'll dive deep into that. But you'll call yourself a non-tech founder, right? You studied neuroscience, psychology, or did you have a tech orientation in college?
So I didn't grow up, I'm not a technical founder, but I am a tech founder. So all my companies, my first one was a software company through and through. So, and NYC, that's how we applied as a software company. But no, I'm not technical, correct. I did liberal arts and I did science, absolutely.
But you did manage to build and scale and get into YC and do all of these illustrious things. So talk to us about curiosity and what led to your first company. What was the problem that you're trying to solve? And how does a non-tech founder create a scalable tech company?
Yeah, I think a lot of really awesome big name companies that we know of, the CEO actually wasn't technical, right? So if you even take this, Jobs as a scenario as an example, right? I think that what marks a really good founder, CEO, technical or otherwise, is someone who, two things. One is able to articulate the problem they're solving. So communication is key, and being able to make people buy into your vision, whether that be customers, whether that be investors, whether that be your first hires, being able to be articulate and understand, have acute awareness of your understanding of the world. But the second piece that I think is really important is this aptitude to see a problem and find a way to solve it, to be crazy enough to believe that, even if there's a multi-billion-dollar competitor in your space, that they're not doing a good job and I think I can do it better. And when I started this, it was I was 24. And so that's kind of crazy, right? Most people, my family included, were like, what are you doing? You have a job. Why are you going to quit and do this? What are the odds? And the odds are against you. And so I think that I actually personally believe that this idea of critical thinking and communication are two key ingredients. And then just everything else comes down to execution, technical or not. And if a founder is technical and really able to build a great product, but doesn't know how to understand the problem of the customer, you could be building this palace that really no one even needs, that you're in love with. And the inverse is also true. If someone is really passionate about what they do, but they don't know how to execute it as a non-technical founder, you get nowhere. So you kind of need this balance. But I think critical thinking and just the aptitude to get things done and execute on it are two critical ingredients for a founder, technical or not, it doesn't really matter.
Was there early entrepreneurial energy in your family? Was anybody in your extended family, mom's side or dad's side, an entrepreneur? Because there's an interesting mix here. Mom Italian, dad Pakistani. Tell us about their reactions, and how did they take this?
Yeah. Well, look, what I'll say is like immigrant families don't really understand it the same, at least mine didn't. I guess some do, but usually there's this concept of like do the safer thing, get a good job, have a stable pay. And I don't think it's because they don't believe in you. It's just that they're just, it's scary, right? It's this idea of like, how are you going to make it? We don't have, like my family wasn't some wealthy family that came over here. They didn't have deep networks where I could get connected to people, right? We didn't come with, bank balances that I could lean on when it came to starting a company, or didn't have those connections. We had to go out and build them ourselves. And so in a way, when my grandparent, though, on my dad's side came to Canada several years ago with my father and his siblings, my grandparents both actually started this flea market, and they knew no English, and they were Punjabi, knew no English, had this religion that, wasn't even common, right? This way of dressing and looking that was different. And still just persevered, built up this business that ends up becoming very successful for their family and their 10 kids. My dad is one of 10. And
Wow.
goes on, in Punjabi family, right? And then goes on and sets up all of his kids with like a house and their car, and like, becoming like turning the family into like middle class Canadian household that was able to afford things and not have the same narrative of when they came to Canada as immigrants. So to me, that was phenomenal, right? Like whenever I thought about building a company and I'm like, but it's hard, what if I fail? I just think of them and I'm like, oh my God, like if I fail, it's on me. It's not like something in particular, because at the end of the day, they didn't even have language at their advantage. They didn't have the cultural norms. They didn't have connections. So if anything, I've come with more things than what they had set up. So I always felt like it's possible to do, I guess. Maybe you could say that. But I do always struggle with this idea, is an entrepreneur born, is it nurture or nature? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if we can over-optimize and say, because I saw someone in my family do this on their own, like, I don't know, but definitely that played an influence on me. But the other real influence was like, honestly, before starting my own company, I had worked at a startup. And I worked at Top Hat, this company that's doing very well and is still around. And I worked very closely with the CEO and one of the co-founders at the time, Mike and Mosen. And I remember looking at Mike, and I remember actually having a conversation with my then boss, with the CEO of that startup. It was very early stage when I joined. And I was doing really well there, much to my surprise. I'd never worked at a startup before then. This was a tech company. And I remember wanting to start at that time, my first company, start Give Effect, but I just didn't know how to quit. And, you have like college debt to pay off, all this stuff. So how do you quit and just take that leap of faith and let go of all this stability and bet on yourself? Like, you have no guarantee. You could work so hard, and in the end, it might not go anywhere. That's the nature of startups. Sometimes it doesn't work out. The idea you're working on or thing you're building maybe doesn't hit the mark. And I remember going to Mike and saying, hey, listen, like how did you start when you quit, your job or whatever? Like, how did you have the courage? And he said something that made the biggest impact on me, actually, I think. And he said, like, so what? If I failed, so what? And I was like, what do you mean, so what? He goes, I didn't lose anything. I just got this crash course that's better than any MBA, basically. I learned so much in a very short period of time. My resume now looks even better than before. If anything, I can always go back to my last job, but better yet, I'll probably be getting a job, like moving up from where I was in my last position because of this. And he said that, and it was almost like, I swear to God, I remember it like he took this weight off my shoulders. And I think within that week, I put in my resignation. I was like, I'm starting this. Like, what do I have to lose? He's absolutely right. So it's like we have this irrational fear of failure because it's ingrained in us from society. But I think like once you break it down, that failure, what does it really mean? And it could mean different things to different people. Maybe there really is like, you have a mortgage and 2 kids and like, okay, that's real. Like you can't afford to fail. But in my case, with no dependents, with no mortgage to worry about, just young, starting my career, like, what did I have to lose? He was absolutely right. He didn't know at the time that he was setting me up for that, but it's still, to this day, I give him credit for saying that. So all that to say, a community of other founders makes a big impact on helping someone become entrepreneurial, I think.
It does. How did Mike take to your resignation? And what did you do right after?
He wasn't very impressed at first, mostly because I didn't announce what I was going to do. I kept it very low key, and I just resigned. And they wanted to know, I guess, what led to that. Like, it was very surprising, I suppose. But afterwards has been like, I remember when I was working on Give Effect, just a great cheerleader, had always been like speaking highly of us or referring wherever he could. If someone was doing something in nonprofits, speaking about our company, I consider him still someone who inspired me to go on and take that leap of faith, and really in admiration of everything he does. So we're on great terms at this point. But yeah, he at the beginning, it was a little like, oh no, what are you doing?
What did I do?
Yes.
You went around building Give Effect in a very particular manner, in a very deliberate manner. Tell me about the early days of Give Effect, and then we'll dive deep into concepts of venture capital, MRR, when to raise, etc. But give us a flavor of the first 100 days of Give Effect, and what was your routine like? What were you thinking? What was fear of failure, if anything, on your mind?
I mean, there's constant fear of failure, constant imposter syndrome. But what I will say is, I was obsessed with solving a problem in my industry. So I had worked in nonprofits. I had worked at the third largest refugee settlement center in Canada. And the nature of the work that nonprofit professionals do is really important, right? Like, they're serving the most important members of our community. When you think of an SPCA, when you think of a food bank, when you think of Habitat for Humanity, Boys and Girls Club, et cetera, right? Their work is so important. And one thing that always struck me is there was this giant company, this competitor that's a multi-billion-dollar competitor out there building software for nonprofits. And I'd used those tools, and it was really terrible software. It was built from like in the 80s, from when I was born. And it was just not good software, yet it wasn't cheap, but there was no one really innovating in the space. They had this blanket monopoly. And the reason being that most founders just didn't think this was a sector to innovate on, right? You could say it's because most founders hadn't worked in nonprofits, so weren't aware of the problem, but I had, and it was a really near and dear cause to me. And I knew that it was a really large sector as well, that it could not only be a business that does good, but also does well. Nonprofits are the third largest contributor to GDP in the US. Nonprofit professionals make up a lot of job creation in the US. And yet every other industry has been innovated by software. We have ed tech innovation, we have healthcare being innovated, we have fintech, but nothing for this giant industry that's like the third largest after e-commerce and automobile. And so to me, that was crazy, right? Like, that's ridiculous. There's this overlooked large industry that's doing really important work that needs good software to do their job. Yet here they are still working in spreadsheets after spending thousands and thousands of dollars on software that's designed for them. And that was really it. I wanted to just build a better version of the software that nonprofits need, and decided to build, my first product was this company that had like CRM, email marketing, volunteer management, fundraising software, everything combined in one, so that nonprofits don't have to do data entry by leaving the system. Everything talks to each other.
Right.
Seems so basic, yet doesn't really exist for nonprofits. And that's why we were able to be really successful in the space as well. Yeah.
So that was the vision of the company. You had a clear market that you wanted to go into, a clear problem. But building that product out, how did you find the first set of engineers, your partners, so to speak?
Well, I want to go back and be really real with you. By no means, when it was time to go set out and solve this problem, did we know that, okay, this is what the perfect solution looks like. We started off with this idea of being crowdfunding for nonprofits, so solving one piece of the puzzle. And then after that, we went ahead and realized, okay, this is one piece of the puzzle. We're actually still not solving the problem. And I didn't get the answer to that until I actually spoke to customers who were saying no. So I always say this, that like the customers who actually reject your product in the early days, that is your like product feedback. And if you're, as a CEO, your job is to figure out and have empathy for why they're saying no, rather than have your ego bruised and like walk away and move on to the next customer, or assume they're saying no because of cost or some other reasons that I go into usually when I talk about this piece. But it's like that no is how we figured out what we need, what was that ideal solution. So we had a vision for what, like I had a vision for what problem I wanted to solve. The way I was manifesting the solution isn't what the customer really wanted. And so then had to sit back, understand really what was it going to take to turn that no into a yes. And that's how we really built out this product over a period of time. Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you to connect the dots between boxing and rejection.
Most people don't think there's a parallel there, but it really is. So, when I was in college, I don't know why, I suddenly thought it would be great for me to take up boxing. And I thought
sure, why not?
And I was like, this will be great for me. This is what I need to do. I want to say it's part of maybe my heritage and background. There was a way to let out all that. We have so much energy, so it's a good way to let out all of that. So anyway, I decided I wanted to become a boxer, and I was taking these boxing classes, and I had this really great trainer. He was like two-time Olympic trainer and like super accomplished. And I thought when I was starting out, like I really didn't last long, by the way, but I thought when I was starting out that there's going to be like, what's the way to become a great boxer? So I was like, well, I want to master this. So I came to him and I was like, listen, how do you become a really fabulous boxer? What's the method? And I thought he was going to give me like techniques about how to dodge a punch or how to swing or what, terminology that I'd have to understand or certain techniques about the logistics of boxing. And instead he looked at me and he stopped and he said, actually, Anisa, it's really simple. Before you can master the techniques to become an amazing boxer, you have to get over one important thing. I was like, what is it? And he goes, the fear of getting punched in the face. And it took me actually a few minutes to sit back and understand what he was saying, because what he wasn't saying is you have to get over getting punched in the face and like it's not supposed to hurt. That's not what he was saying at all. What he was saying is you have to get over the fear of getting punched in the face. Because only after you're not afraid of getting punched in the face can you stop and say, okay, I got punched, but why? What did I do wrong? What method did I skip? What could I have done better? Can you really improve on it? But if you duck or you go for cover before you ever got punched because you're so afraid of that fear of getting punched in the face before you ever got punched, you're not going to actually improve. You're going to stay in your comfort zone. In fact, you're not going to go ahead and box. And to me, that was so, his words would echo loud and clear when it came time to start my first company. See, most founders fail, especially I would say this really, I think has to be nuanced. I think hardware companies are different to an extent. I think B2C consumer products are different to an extent, but B2B software companies especially, you don't need really much capital to get started. And the reason that most founders fail at scaling their companies is they're so afraid of that rejection, because it does feel like getting punched in the face. When you go into that first meeting with a customer who's been in their industry forever, right? If you're innovating in a larger, industry, it's an old industry, and they've been in their space for a very long time. You come into it as this new founder, you don't really probably know everything that you need to know at that stage. You probably sound really terrible at that time compared to what you sound much later once you have traction and revenue and years of doing this. So really it feels like getting punched in the face. You built this product and people think it's garbage, and you have to learn how to not be afraid of that no, but rather seek that no out. Really, it's hard to do, but really passionately, so that you can find how to turn the no into a yes.
So how did you start turning those no's into yes? Perhaps boxing training, and what else?
Well, so when I went ahead, I was obsessed with this idea of, look, we were bootstrapped and, weren't from Silicon Valley, bootstrap company. So for me, it was like, well, we need revenue to be able to continue what we're doing. And so tried to go out direct to customers. I had worked in the industry. So at first I went to like people that I knew, nonprofits that I'd worked at, people I'd worked with who knew me. And at that time it was like, hey, come on board because of this trust of like who I am, like this new vendor, but you know me. And it was this freemium idea, like you can get the product for free. And actually freemiums are the worst thing in the world, because most of the people that I knew that were really great people in the nonprofit sector didn't care to use the product because it was a freemium. Like, so they were like, oh, this is nice, I'll do it for my friend as a favor. But that's very different than a customer, right? A customer isn't doing you a favor. A customer is seeking you out because you're going to solve their problem. And so I decided I have to have the customer pay for this product. It doesn't matter what they're paying. It has to be just something significant enough significant enough that they feel the pain, that they paid for it. So when the product isn't doing what they want, they have to pick up the phone and like give me an earful for why it's not working really well. And that's amazing because that's what builds out your product. That's what built out our product. And so for me, it was like, I got to start emailing customers that I don't know, go out and email nonprofits. Nonprofits are 501c3s, so you can get their emails publicly available. And I would scrape and find emails and go online and LinkedIn and find any connections we have in common. And while LinkedIn's great, I would still resort back to email. Even if it was a cold email, I'd make sure the subject line and the body of the email is relevant. Like I knew what we were talking about. I understood the industry, I'd worked in it. And I was asking for like, hey, give me a shot at like showing you what we built. We believe we can solve this specific pain point of yours. And for those that did respond to the email, I guess it was their specific pain point, right? So we were very direct in what pain point we were solving. And, of course, most of those people who came to demos to meet with me or come on the phone and chat about the product were a no, because maybe the product wasn't where it needed to be. And every time I'd get a note, let's say I have a call set up a week from now, I'd go back with my co-founders at the time, my engineering team, and I'd say, this is what we need to change in the product before the next meeting. So we have to go out. And so at first you do things that don't scale. And so we were like, we have to fix this. And then I'd call them back and say, hey, the product has now evolved. Would you like to take another look? And getting that first customer is so hard. I still remember that first check. And then it's about getting your first 3, your first 5, 10, and then from there we start putting process around it.
Tell us about the first check.
God, the first check was a nonprofit that provided resources to individuals who were visually impaired. And it was Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind, actually. I distinctly remember them by name. And they were the first main check. Like we had already customers that we were serving at the time that were doing crowdfunding, but they were an early adopter of the product. And, at the time, the product was also a very different price point than it was later. Obviously, we didn't have as much built out. But when they came on board, I think after that, every morning was anxiety driven after we onboarded that customer. We were also in YC by then. But every morning I had this anxiety of, oh my God, I'm sure I'm going to look at my inbox and there's an email from them about why they're leaving our product because it's just not, it doesn't do this, or this piece isn't working. And I think most founders can relate to this syndrome, this fear that we have, this anxiety of, oh, is the customer going to be happy using it? And let me tell you, there were a lot of things that we had to fix and make better, but I think 10x like our product development roadmap efficiency because of those early adopters and what we built out for them. So yeah, it's a powerful feeling when you have someone who's paid for the product because they ascribe value to something you built.
Right.
And that's powerful because it helps you then understand who you're serving specifically, the customer and their pain points, rather than, again, going back into this idea phase as a founder, philosophizing what the best method is to solve the problem when really maybe your customer wants something else. So yeah, it was humbling.
And what I'd noticed from your story so far, deep customer insights. You'd worked in the sector, you knew who you were talking to, you'd built out the product, accelerated the rate of growth. But very briefly, I think I saw the email that you sent to your car. That was a long essay. That was a very particular kind of an email that you'd written. Why did you write it that way?
A/B
And could you describe that email to our audience?
Yeah. What I'll summarize that is like, listen, email marketing is really, really powerful. Going out and directly emailing your customers really matters. I still to this day believe that, even with LinkedIn being so popular right now. So yes, LinkedIn is important, but I actually think email is still my primary and LinkedIn is an add-on. And I really stand by that. So what I did is we had these emails that were like based on best practices of how to draft a cold email to your customer for sales, and copied a bunch of different formats, modified subject lines. And I was obsessed, like I am a data geek. So I was obsessed with the data on this and like, what does a customer say? So let's send out like 50 of these emails, 50 of this version and see what happens. And again, as with everything, I hope if anyone's listening to this, the theme here is like, those no's are your greatest teacher. So when I would get emails back, the rejection emails of why someone, either the low open rates is one thing, but people would actually reply back rejecting the email and saying no and following up with them as to like why they might be saying no. That's what really was super insightful and taught me so much. So a lot of times people would
And you were deliberate about that. You always did that, right?
always did that. In the early days, oh my God, if we didn't do that, there's no way we would have learned as much as we did. I did that. I would go from 6 a.m., work from 6 a.m. till midnight. And from 6 a.m., I was setting up, taking all the data from the night before and setting up my email blasts to be like really significant. Sometimes they weren't even email blasts. I'd be like manually emailing people. And so again, doing things that don't scale at the beginning, the early days. And I was just obsessed with like finding if there was a connection, I knew them, mutual contact, something or another, I would want that to be in my subject, in my intro paragraph, right? But really what was really important in that intro paragraph was like, you have like very little time before you land in someone's trash or spam from when you actually send them the email. And I thought to myself, well, what's the hook? What do they care to know about? Get right to the point. So it was about like, this is what we do or the pain point that we solve. And I found that instead of saying what we do as my main subject line, if we talked about what we solve, the pain point that we solve, we actually had a better response in terms of the email response rate. So I would lead with, look, we're solving this problem for customers similar to yours. They also care very little, I realize, about my expertise and my background and that I'm a Forbes 30 under 30 and all that doesn't matter to your customer right now. Like, that's great, Anisa, but I don't know you. This is a cold email. So for me to get a response from them right away, I had to go ahead and think to myself, well, what matters to them in their day? Going back to empathy of your customer. It's so important. So I was like, okay, well, this is the pain point we're solving. What else matters to them for social proofing? We do this for customers like yours. So if we serve food banks and the email was to a food bank, you better believe I realized early on that, hey, talking to them about other food banks, could be anywhere in the US, is powerful to them because now you have their attention. Oh, you do serve customers like mine. You understand my pain point. If it wasn't a food bank, talking about maybe other nonprofits of a similar revenue size, that mattered to them because a small nonprofit versus a big one. Maybe it was tech stack. Other nonprofits that are using Blackbot or Donor Perfect, et cetera. We help replace their pain points. So like making sure there was something that they could relate to. And so that's where the emails had to be very personalized at the beginning because I had to really figure out, okay, I'm emailing this set and I have no customers in common, but I do have the tech stack in common. We have solved this for other customers that have a similar tech stack or revenue size. And so, or location was a less powerful one, but like New York City, you're in New York City, this other customer of ours is New York City as well. You know, we'd love to talk to you about how we're solving this specific problem. And so once you understand that hook at the beginning, so once you've hooked them in, then like give them the meat of it. Don't have them guessing what you do. Like give them a little summary of it, not something too overwhelming, some examples that they might look at, and then literally an easy ask for setting up that discovery call or demo or whatever it is that you're trying to do, or just hop on a phone call. And so the email that we had was very long, but that longer email did 90
with lots of links.
Better. Yeah, subject line, etc. So much better. And so I always tell founders, like, there's best practices and that's great. Look at them. But at the end of the day, A/B testing is everything. And you have to figure out what your customer responds to. Maybe you're selling something to a technical audience and they don't want a super long email like that. Maybe you're selling to customers like nonprofits, details what they're looking for. It depends on just your customer. You won't know that through a best practice. You'll know that by implementing A/B testing.
Great feedback for our audience around the world. We have like these hubs from Toronto to Istanbul, everywhere. And in all of these hubs, they're entrepreneurs building interesting companies. I think this particular insight is so useful when you don't really have the product market fit. But you've understood the problem even at that stage. When you have the product market fit like you did, and you're reaching out to a different set of stakeholders, it's still the same. So Anisa, it seems like you were on a good path. You were hustling hard. You were solving the problem. Why raise money at all? I mean, what was the core need? Because you went about fundraising in a very deliberate way. Walk us through the journey.
Yeah, so actually with Give Effect, there was never fundraising. We never raised to be able to reach the numbers that we did. I, with a very small team, built it out to just under 2 million annual processing revenue of SaaS. Had no outside investors beyond obviously Y Combinator, that always has 7% in the companies. There were no outside investors, and with But to answer your question about why take revenue or why.
My question was why Combinator and the likes? Like why should anybody raise, or why Combinator at all?
Yeah, I don't think a Y Combinator is raising, to be honest. I think a Y Combinator is a way to massively accelerate your business. When people usually come to me and they say, oh, I'm applying to YC because I want to learn how to run a business, I'm like, oh gosh, that's the wrong reason to apply to YC. They are not sitting down with you and doing tutorials about like how to build a business. That actually doesn't happen. You sit around in these weekly kind of smaller groups, and they're going to go around the room and say, how much did you grow this week? How much did you grow this week? Why did you not grow by X number, 30%, whatever it might be that they're looking for. And they'll say, you have a problem. How many users did you speak with to solve the problem? All it is, yes, they give you 120,000 and it changes. Now it might be, I think, 125 or something of the sort, which is nothing, when you think of it in the grand scheme of things for 7%. But it's enough to keep you grinding for 3 months, give you enough revenue to like have a really small place near the YC campus and just be able to like grind out, get customers, be obsessed with your user, right? So that by the time demo day comes around, you have this hockey stick ideally to show and talk to investors. So yes, demo day, being a Y Combinator company, places a lot of value in cloud when it comes to demo day, right? It gives you access to, if you don't have access to that network, it now gives you access to it. So that's powerful. But YC, even if you weren't going to raise, and we knew before demo day, we had decided that we were not going to fundraise pre-demo day. And even then, I would say YC is so critical for, and again, I know it's changed a lot, but it was such a fundamental impact on our business. The reason simply is your co-founders. You're sitting with other really smart founders as well, who are in the same boat as you, who are genuinely happy when you succeed. And so many problems, so many solutions that we came up with, we're sitting around having lunch, or we all kind of lived in the same campus area, sitting around having lunch with other founders and just saying like, have you thought about solving the problem this way? Or did you talk to so-and-so? It's also different than I think your traditional MBA program where there's no fronting. Yes, in the press, we might be talking about how our startup is growing and all the things we're doing. But when we were sitting around the room as founders, YC had this culture of humility that was like, you want to actually be honest about your problems, because there might be someone who can help solve it for you, help give you ideas. If you're going to pretend you have everything figured out, you're actually not going to benefit from that network, right? And so YC's power is a network of other founders. The ability to go to alumni founders by this internal email listserv that we have, so I could reach out to the CEO and founder of WePay, or talk to somebody who's in another adjacent industry and just understand how they solve these problems. That's powerful. I don't think you could. I think 7% is a bargain for that. So YC just rapidly accelerates your business, is my opinion, because of the network of founders and this culture of talking about what's broken in your startup and this community. It's so lonely, and mental health wise, it's just so isolating building a company. And if you don't have a strong network of co-founders around you, I think it's easier to give up and call it quits when the going gets tough. I think that people underestimate the value of that community.
Just 2 questions on YC. One, because it comes to us a lot. We have in the past hosted several Y Combinator founders, but your story of getting into YC, talk to us about the best practices. How did you tailor your application? Because you were also catering to a very particular different kind of a customer, maybe non-standard YC customers. What's your advice to such founders, and what's your secret sauce there?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a secret sauce for it. I would just say that YC looks to understand how you intimately understand your customer, your market, and how you believe and know that you're going to scale out into this market and build a really big business around it. I don't think there's any one industry that YC looks for, right? Like, they've invested in shoe companies, a bottle company like Give Me Tap. They've invested in, us as software for nonprofits. They've invested in a t-shirt company, for God's sake, Teespring. Like, I don't think there's an industry that YC is looking for. They invested in, I remember looking at a company at the time as an alumni going back, there was this company that is like a cart, like a tea to go. You know how we have the thali wale that go in India and Pakistan? Like, it was basically that, but like in Europe. And so I don't believe that there's an industry. I do believe that YC is looking for companies that are rapidly scaling and are going to really help, revolutionize the sector or make it better,
right?
And build things that people want. They're going to make things that people want, and that you understand how you're going to do it. So they're betting on the team. Why are you the best team to go out and do this? Because that's the hardest thing. They're betting on, what do you understand about your customer? that your competitor doesn't understand, or the other people in the space don't understand that you do, which is why you're going to be successful. Tell me why we should bet on you.
Right.
And then just the hunger, like how hungry is this founder to succeed? I think that's really what it takes. I was actually obsessed with, I thought it would be really influential for me to be able to meet with these two individuals that I had looked up, Gary Tan and Alexis Ohanian. I had no idea who they were. I had just been looking for mentors once we had started Give Effect, and it was really hard. And we were doing this crowdfunding model, and I knew that we had to fix something in it. And I was like, oh my God, how do I find people in the space? There's all this noise in the startup sector of consultants and advisors who are like, run away from them. And then there's like founders who have done something, and for whatever reason, I can't even remember why, but those two, Gary Tan and Alexis Ohanian at the time, were two names that I was really like, okay, I have to meet with these people. I have to find a way. And I think I had LinkedIn them or whatever. That same week, I got a message from a local in Toronto startup hub conference or some event saying, hey, Anisa, we have 2 tickets to this event. The keynote is this guy, Alexis Ohanian, on his book Without Their Permission. I was like, what? I was trying to reach this person and I thought, oh, I have to go to this event and I'm going to have to talk to him. Like I have to make a point. And we get there and we're at this event, and afterwards I buy his book so that he could sign my book. And I'm like, while he's signing the book, I'm using this as an excuse to pitch him, right? Shooters shoot. So always take your shot. And I did. And he's like, listen, have you applied to YC? I had no idea what that was. I really had no clue what YC was. And he's like, apply to YC and then tweet me your Hacker News ID. That was it. So the deadline was the next day, by the way. So that night I had my co-founders, they're like, what is this? What are we doing? I'm like, you're going to say this line for the video, because you submit this little video as well, the founding team. Right. You're going to say this other line. And they're like, what is this for? And I'm like, don't worry about it. Just say this line. And I filled out the application, completed the video, submitted, never heard anything. And I thought, okay, well, like once I realized what YC was, it's so hard to get into YC. And I didn't expect that we'd even get accepted. And then we got this email saying, hey, we haven't heard back from you guys. Are you not interested in coming to your interview anymore? Their original acceptance to come to an interview went in our junk folder. So again, last night we get to book this flight. Like it was one shot apply. It wasn't and it was the day before the deadline. Like, so I don't know that I have any advice to give beyond, I think what helped us is I really knew the customer, understood the pain point, was able to articulate it, talked about the team, and talked about if we get into YC, how we're going to continue to scale. That was it.
And take your shots and book last minute tickets. 2 important advice when required.
And then we went there. Justin Kahn was was the person who actually picked up the phone to call us to let us know we got in after our interview. And he told me afterwards that when I picked up the phone, when he called us, he goes, that's one of his memorable moments, because I think I may have like screamed, like, I just thought it was going to be a rejection. You have all this imposter syndrome. I don't know if it's like this idea of being, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the reasons are. I think a lot of founders struggle with it, but I thought there's no way we're going to get in. We built software for nonprofits. Like that can't be cool enough to get into YC. And so I tell people, like, there's no industry. Don't that's a wrong approach. There's no specific industry they're looking for. They're really looking for the things that you should want to know if you're going to build a successful company anyway.
Right. And demo day, no fundraising. Was that an easy call? And what was demo day like?
Demo day is one of the most stressful days of your life. I barely remember a lot of it because the CEO founders who are pitching, you're just like, it's a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind. And everyone says this. Everyone who had to pitch is like, it was a whirlwind. And everyone who is the co-founders who are standing there, it's a little bit of the edges off. You're networking a little bit, but it's still a stressful day if you're fundraising. For us, it was a little bit more relaxing because we weren't in the rat race of raising at the time. So, you always have this thought of, oh God, I hope the revenue continues to grow. But we were doing 10K MRR at the time. And like, it was enough to keep going. And we thought, let's just see how far we can take this before we even approach raising. And then that just kind of grew from there. But yeah, I think that it's a stressful day for sure. Yeah.
But great. Like, so your advice was, or at that time, counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense now. Grow your MRR to as much as you can with the existing resources, and then see if there's a VC founder fit. Is
VC
would that
angels
be?
could be super angels. I think that one thing I've realized now is there's so many forms of funding that you don't have to just rely on the traditional like tier one VC route. You know, capital is capital, right? So just make sure, of course, the person who's giving you capital isn't someone who's going to be like knocking on your door every minute, bugging you while you're trying to build your business, super obsessed about their money, thinking that, oh my God, what's going to happen with it? Like, that's terrible, right? The last thing you want to do is building business is hard. You don't want to be babysitting the person who gave you capital so you could go grow this business. And if what they want is a clear-cut answer of like how it's going to grow and there's going to be no loss and no mistakes like that, run away from someone like that for sure. So I think like all things equal, capital is capital. Do your due diligence for sure. Like, yeah, someone who understands your domain is cool, but really like it's really good to know how was this person with other founders that he gave money to. So he or she gave money to, I should say. So you should want to kind of do some due diligence on them, because a bad relationship can be really bad and really harmful for your business. A lot of time wasted. Right. So don't take expensive money. And that's what I call expensive money. So yeah, I think that VC or otherwise, I'd like to say, because like that's not the only way. And I think people come into this thinking that's the only path. And I want to be clear, my position isn't that you should never raise. I think if you want to build like a really big business, you will at some point have to raise. And I think if we had continued on with, you know, give effect as this model to grow out, we would have gone for an A round, but we would have diluted a lot less because of the fact that we built it out on revenue. And I'd rather go out and find a hire that's needed to help take the business to the next level, because that's still cheaper than giving out equity to someone who's going to give you money, but you still have to find how to deploy it. You still have to go scale your team and grow it, which is, I don't care who you are, how much money you have, that's so challenging for any business, how to scale your team out at a certain point. So there is a time and a place to raise. It's not my advice that you should never raise. I think every founder should just not get caught up in the hype and think there's this one formula, you got to go raise money, but instead be obsessed with revenue. And then even if you want to raise, you now have the balls in your court, you have leverage. You have investors picking up the phone or in fact calling you because you actually have a real business.
Yeah, fantastic advice, Anisa. So demo day gets over, you continuing on this path of growing your MRR, etc. When did you start reaching hyperscale? Because this company had a pretty interesting conclusion recently. So talk to us about that phase and how did you feel when you knew that you were close to the finish line and when you actually crossed it?
Yeah, so 3 years in, like we'd been at it for like a year and a half before YC, but it was this other model, crowdfunding model. Once we had applied to YC, we'd already pivoted to doing software, being this backend CRM, operations software like email marketing, volunteer scheduling, CRM, etc. And started getting our first checks in for that, right? That was pre-YC. So our whole focus going into YC was really clear. It was get more of these customers. Like there was no questions asked, right? That's all day and night, and build the product to get even better so that the people who aren't saying yes, if there was a feature set they needed, let's go build it out. That's it, which helps a lot. That's what I mean by like obsessed with your customers and revenue. It's not even just for the sake of revenue. It just helps you give clarity on what you have to focus on, who your audience is. So went out and did that. And the first couple of years were so brutal. We couldn't pay ourselves. We had to like, whatever revenue we did have, if we wanted to grow, had to go and hire based on that. It was fun times, but it was stressful. 3 years at the 3-year mark, I was like, okay, we have a method. We have a process that's working. I can see how we can scale this out. I can see the pace that it'll scale out at. And then we really had to figure out a way, and the problem that we ultimately faced was, how do you scale out fast enough? How do you build out like a good sales force to be able to like go out and scale this and have more impact? And right. It's so hard to figure that out because it comes down to hiring and scaling. It's really challenging, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So you concluded the business recently. Was it a bittersweet feeling? Was it a hurrah moment? What was it like?
Yeah, so we had decided a couple years before selling that we wanted to go for a sale. That we didn't want to raise a round. That we decided, it had been a long process. We'd all been in it. Founding teams spend a lot of time together, and there comes a point where you have to decide like how much energy everyone has, how much gas is left in the tank, and what's the best time. Is it a graceful time to part ways and move on? And so we had decided that that was the best conclusion for our business, and talked to YC and went through a bunch of scenarios. went through that, actually was really successful at that, ended up getting 4 offers, and had a buyer term sheet in hand, multiple term sheets in hand. The day that we got the term sheet in hand, my co-founder, who was my ex, actually messaged me saying that they don't need me anymore, and that he's upset that I never appreciated him 7 years ago when we dated, even though we had broken up many years ago. So here was this term sheet, this multi-million-dollar term sheet in hand, and a business that I built along with my co-founders, and the 2 brothers, my co-founders, who individually were not major shareholders compared to me, but combined were, over an email one day, told me goodbye. So fired me as a CEO, removed me as president, and then called immigration to have me deported. And that was my ending there. You didn't expect that, but that is how it ended. So it was a great story, a great term sheet in hand, a great ending. But rather than becoming, having the opportunity to even see an exit for himself and become a multimillionaire, it was to punish me. And that was it. And I moved on.
You moved on, and you moved on stronger, I guess. I think there's a new company brewing, right? There
is. It was a new company. The new company for me was like, it's interesting because it wasn't in my domain. It wasn't in my area of expertise. It wasn't something that I thought I'd be building. Everyone thought it would be SaaS again. But, there was this exit that we were going towards. There's this term sheet in hand. There's this, all of our employees were going to keep jobs. They were all going to get raises. All of our customers were going to be well taken care of. Been working on this process diligently. And then out of nowhere to have your life pulled from you. I think a lesson here could be about be very careful, competency should never be an excuse to overlook an ethical co-founder. And if you can see signs early on, no matter how competent you think they are, I would advise every founder to be really, really careful, no matter how much equity you have or not. And it was a very, very difficult, not just expensive lesson for me. It was devastating. I was extremely depressed, and it's in the middle of a pandemic. And then they call immigration to kill my visa. Like what was next? I thought the only thing next was come and kill my cats, I couldn't understand why someone would do this. I'm going to tell you, I sat there because this is how my second company was born. I sat there and I just couldn't understand how someone could do this and live with themselves. I really couldn't. I was like, no, they're gonna, and everybody tried to, YC jumped in, other founders like, no, don't worry, they're just being emotional. No one walks away from a deal like this. And, it didn't happen in the end. And they'd removed me and it was unjust. It was wrong. It was everything that everyone knows. And I was like, how could they be okay with it? So I had tears running down my eyes, and it's COVID, it's a pandemic. So it's not like, okay, go take a vacation, go clear your head, go somewhere, go do something. One, I had to be in survival mode to redo my immigration in time. Otherwise, in a month, I had to leave. And I was thinking, it's COVID again. Do I sell my furniture and leave?
So basically, you're Canadian and you have to go back to Canada.
Correct. Well, I didn't. I managed to redo my entire process and complete my green card in time. But it was like this whole process where I was like, what do I do with myself right now? How do I deal with this depression? And it was like something had died. I was grieving, it was this injustice that happened. And to me, it was like, I would have tears running down my face. And I remember my boyfriend sitting there telling me, he goes, you're not a destroyer, right? You don't even want to, as you're pursuing justice, you don't want to do anything that can harm your company because you built that company and you love it so much that even as you want your justice, you're so afraid to speak on this or to talk about it because you don't want it to harm the company that you built. You're a builder and they're destroyers, but you're a builder. What's going to make you happy, what's going to make you wholesome again, at least in the immediate, is go out and build. And he said that and immediately a switch went off. I was like, I gotta put all this energy into something that I'd want to build. And whatever reason it is, I can't explain why. This idea that I had been kind of toying with for a while just kept coming to the forefront. There were a few ideas I was thinking of that I was working on, but this one just kept I was obsessed with it. And for me, it was like, how do we solve the literacy crisis across America? How do we help, especially with early literacy, how do we help kids fall in love with reading? And I thought about also just how do we help raise happy future adults? And to me, a lot of my friends who were artists, I was like, the work they do is so powerful. It brings so much joy, so much life to me. And I think to those around us, it brings our emotions to the forefront, performing arts and theater. And I thought, what if there was a way to blend early literacy and performing arts, but to bring books to life? Like, what if that could happen? And that's kind of how it started. And it's worked really well for us. I mean, we're a contracted vendor with New York City Department of Education. We are in classrooms, we're in classroom education, growing 100% month over month. So we surpassed the 20K MRR mark, which is really exciting.
Congratulations. This is double that of the previous gig at one point.
Thank you. It's
YC time, yeah.
It's been really, really a lot faster. So obviously one thing I'll say to founders is now having seen this outcome, whether you want to call it, at the end of the day, we did have a successful exit that my co-founders killed, but took it all the way. But even if you want to call that failure, whatever you want to dub it as, what I'll say to founders is, even if you feel at your startup, the knowledge, as long as you understood the no's and we're obsessed with understanding how you can turn that no into a yes, when you start your second company, it's going to only help you 10x and grow so much faster because you've made those mistakes. So this time around, even though completely different industry, completely different domain, here we were not making a lot of those time-consuming mistakes and really understanding how to approach our customer and get to the customer and how to add value. Because for me, I really do believe that like the problem that I'm obsessed with solving is by grade 4, 40% of students across America, by the time they reach grade 4, are reading 2 levels below their grade level. So we are failing almost half of our youth by the time before they even graduate elementary school. And there's no catching up, right? Then this problem just becomes a cyclical effect and is a representation of the socioeconomic imbalance that we see in our nation. And a lot of our work is with Title I schools. And what makes me really passionate is the way that we do our workshops, the way that we have our lesson plans in schools, is how our amazing community of artists and educators are able to have the kids fall in love with reading, to have the confidence and passion to read, to have the analysis and comprehension and do better on tests. Like that, it's really, it's a really exciting thing to be able to see the impact of your work now, not years down the road, right? So we're able to like actually see how we're making a difference today. It's really cool.
Yeah. And what I love about it, it's totally scalable. This same problem exists in many other countries. And also the literacy point that you mentioned about reading ability in different grades is actually a very strong income correlator. It has a geography correlator. It has a gender correlation as well. So I think more power to what you're building and who you're building it for.
Thank you.
But infinite scale, I think you've learned some important lessons from scaling a very successful business. And now it's time for next.
Yeah. So like what I'll say to that is absolutely a lot of applications in so many other industries, but focus is everything, right? So like today you focus on the thing that is important to the business today. And like and it sounds so simple, like focus on what matters today, but it really is because there's so many other areas you can scale and grow into as a founder. Sometimes the hardest thing is saying no to something. So one thing for us was like, I always tell people when we sit around the room and talk about adjacent industries, like, hey, that's real and we can go there. But you know what? New York City Department of Education is the largest education district in the US. Let's kill it there. Let's serve every elementary school there. Let's have a really great program. Let's make sure that we successfully let our reputation speak for itself. And then we can talk about, doing middle school, and we can talk about high school and how that scales out. We can talk about beyond books and literacy. How do we move into like other types of maybe math and science and other subjects? Because I do believe it's right there, but absolutely no doubt scalable to countries beyond, because to your point, literacy matters regardless of where you're located. Absolutely.
Yeah. So essentially you're building out a marketplace now. How does Tiny Broadway really work?
Yeah. So the way that it works is we go ahead and have these workshops that we pair in classrooms, and we specifically pair books with our workshops. So we interpret the books and bring it to life through art and theater. The concept is really simple. What inspired me was when we think of what Lynn did with a piece of history textbook, Alexander Hamilton, and brought that textbook to life with Hamilton the musical. What he did wasn't just make a super blockbuster hit that everyone is obsessed with, but also kids and students. especially elementary school students are obsessed with. In fact,
Right.
we can say that, confidently say that students have learned more about Alexander Hamilton, stats, dates, figures, storyline of the history through and from, inspired that from that musical, than from any textbook setting. And so that was phenomenal to me, right? Like that was so crazy. And I thought, can we do that with every textbook? Can we go ahead and do that with just books in general? Can we help make kids see that book come to life and fall in love with reading? And so we have this really cool workshop format, and we have these amazing artists and educators that we pair for it. We take their creative concepts and we bring books to life. And we have specific books that we pair with, but we're always scaling out our book list. And for us, what's really important also in the books that we select is that we give voice to diverse authors, not only because it's good business for us. At the end of the day, our biggest client is New York City, and our students are as diverse as the beautiful city of New York. But what on a personal level matters to me is like when I think of my nephew Aziz, I would hope that when he goes to school, he's 4, I would hope that when he goes to school, he'll be able to, you know, as a brown Muslim boy, he'll be able to see himself in the books that are selected. And so it matters to us both on a business level, but on a personal level, that we really foster diversity in the books that we pick so students can see themselves, so the books are relevant, so our content is relevant, and hopefully, just hopefully inspire a love of reading. And we're betting that we're going to be able to do that and continue to do that with Tiny Broadway.
Awesome. Last section of this discussion is regrets and high points. What was the highest point? You've been an entrepreneur now close to a decade, exited a successful company, done really interesting things, but also had a very, very peculiar conclusion, right? So talk to us about that. And if you could reflect on how you felt and what you would have done differently when you started seeing the early signs of lack of trust. What's your advice to entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs?
Oh man, yeah. I think the high point for me is really simple. Beyond obviously the first checks in the mail, the first like contracts closed, those I always remember. Those are so powerful. Our first early users, like, you know, in terms of like a product, I think when it comes to your friends using your product and saying something really positive about it, that always matters on a personal level. But the most highlight for me is team members. So, you know, when we had with Give Effect, it was like team members that were hired and were part of the team. And then here it would be like our artist community, especially when they come and write to me or message me or will say, hop on a call and say like, this has given me purpose, what we do here, being able to see the impact of my work. Like having a mission is cool, but then having a mission that like other people can share and takes on a life bigger than you as that founder, God, I don't think there's any feeling that comes close to it. And I don't think there's ever a day that becomes like boring to hear. It's such an exciting feeling. And so that's a highlight for me for sure, hands down. In terms of the low point, like, you know, there's no substituting for a good person. So people say, you know, do you want to hire someone who's a good person, who's like, you know, people say don't hire assholes, they're not asshole rule. I think the easier way to put it is like, do you want to hire a good person because the bar shouldn't be so low? Someone who has strong ethical standards, or do you want to just hire someone who's like really competent in the specific skill set that you need? And I think the mistake that I look back at is thinking that, you know, going into business with people who were really competent at something that I knew was going to be important to the business, that was so important that I can overlook and manage, that I'll be able to manage the other shortcomings. But I don't think that, I don't like to reflect too much on hindsight, because honest to goodness, if you asked me, even now with the ending and what's happened, if you asked me, could you have seen this years ago? Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I like to trust people in the world, and I hope I don't lose sight of that as a result of this experience. But I just still find it hard to fathom doing this to someone, or that they would like, it's hard for me to sit there and say, aha, I could have seen when they were. I saw a lot of things that should have made me pause though and say, these people, are they aligned with the mission of this business? Do they care about the customer that we're serving? Why are they involved with this? Is it the right reasons? Not to say that financial gains are alone the wrong reasons. I mean, you're building a for-profit company, but do they have other drivers beyond that? I don't think I spent enough time realizing how dangerous it would be to have that misalignment. And then at some point when I realized it, we were just in too deep. The company was already doing well. I mean, it was at a point where we had all vested. So you had to look back and say, well, how do you now manage this? And so the advice was, well, this is a good time to now exit, have a graceful exit at least. And so that's what we tried to then do, is maneuver the ship. And my job, my personal responsibility was making sure that my customers and my team would be well taken care of as CEO and founder. And I took that responsibility really seriously. And so that's one of my
even at your personal cost.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that it would end the way it did, but I really believe that in all of this, I can keep my head held high, and I don't have to. I don't know if the other party feels shame and embarrassment. I don't spend too much time thinking about that anymore, to be honest. But I can keep my head held high and say, with what resources I had, I did the best I could in that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly what you've built, the values you stand for, and what you are building is really an inspiration for people listening. And I hope that in the future adventures, we partner in many things. But yeah, this conversation feels like a Netflix show. So we call ourselves like the Netflix for careers, but it's such an insightful Netflix show, I must add. Thank you, Anisa.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care.